It just doesn't make sense for you to be trying to launch web-to-app quizzes. I understand the temptation to want to because everyone's doing it. All the big apps are pushing more budget through the web. A lot of rapidly scaling apps that we're seeing case studies around are growing this way too. And the benefits are genuinely out of this world. But the benefits only apply if you can convert. And everything in front of you right now suggests that you won't convert with this on the web. Hey everyone, Nathan Hudson here, founder of Perceptycs, where we are building the #1 growth agency for mobile subscription apps in my biased opinion. Now, in this video, I want to talk about the apps that I don't think should be launching web-to-app quiz funnels. That's right, an anti-web-to-app video as part of our web-to-app series. Now, in my last video, I spoke about the biggest assumption that I see people make when it comes to web app funnels. And one of the points I made was that for those of you who are looking to build and launch your first web-to-app funnel, don't rush into launching a quiz, survey, or onboarding funnel. Instead, think about what it is you're trying to achieve by launching on the web, by trying web-to-app, and flesh out some hypotheses around what type of funnels would work best to get you started. But there are certain groups of apps that I really don't think should be launching web-to-app quizzes. In fact, I've not personally ever seen these funnels work for certain types of apps, and that holds up with what I've heard from other experts in the space who work across multiple apps too. So I essentially thought I'd put this video together to save you some time if you are fleshing out hypotheses and trying to figure out whether or not the quiz funnel is a right fit for you. So who shouldn't launch these quizzes? Well, let's look at it this way. If I ask you to think about some of the apps that you think are most successful with web-to-app onboarding funnels, who do you think of? For me, I immediately think of apps like Blinkist, Headway, Calm, Duolingo, Flow, Noom, Ladder. All of these apps I've listed are either in the health and fitness category or the education category. So if you are building a subscription app in the health and fitness space or education space, chances are a web-to-app onboarding funnel might work well for you. Does that mean that any app outside of these two categories shouldn't launch web-to-app onboarding funnels? Definitely not. The same way it doesn't mean that all apps in this category should launch web-to-app onboarding funnels. Strava, for example, doesn't run web-to-app onboarding quizzes. But I think it does suggest that there's something about these apps that lend themselves to web-to-app onboarding funnels. And what we're trying to figure out is what is it about these apps that lend themselves to these? Well, for starters, they all have long in-app onboarding journeys. If I ask you now to think about apps that have really great in-app onboarding surveys, chances are you're going to name the same apps that you just named when I asked you to think about apps that have great web onboarding journeys. Now, when you think about it, it's pretty obvious, right? If you have a long onboarding journey in your app, and that's how you prime users to pay for your product, then a great web-to-app starting point would just be to build that out on the web. Because yes, the platform is different, but the intent's the same because the traffic will be the same, mostly. It's not entirely true because there are different people who respond to different campaign types, and you can use different channels on the web. Hint, hint, back to our pros and cons of web-to-app funnels. But generally speaking, when you launch your first web-to-app funnel, in most cases, you're going to be using the same channels that you were before with the exact same creatives, give or take the CTAs. So pointing them to the same onboarding funnel, the same onboarding journey, makes sense too. But what does this mean by contrast? Well, it means that apps that can't convert users with long onboarding journeys in-app shouldn't expect to see miracles with long onboarding journeys on web. Again, obvious, but you'd be surprised how many people have asked me for advice when it comes to building out web-to-app quizzes who have no onboarding in-app but want to give it a go on the web. Usually they're asking for the advice because they're struggling to think through what questions they could or should be asking users as part of the onboarding journey. Now, here's the thing. If you're struggling to figure out what questions to ask your users during an onboarding process, and your team are racking their brains, racking their heads together, and you just can't come up with something that makes sense, chances are you shouldn't be doing it. And if you're an app who has forced a long onboarding journey at some point historically in-app, and you ran that experiment and it didn't work for you, well, definitely don't start with a web-to-app onboarding quiz. It just doesn't make sense for you to be trying to launch web-to-app quizzes. I understand the temptation to want to because everyone's doing it. All the big apps are pushing more budget through the web. A lot of rapidly scaling apps that we're seeing case studies around are growing this way too. And the benefits are genuinely out of this world. But the benefits only apply if you can convert. And everything in front of you right now suggests that you won't convert with this on the web. So if you have tested this in-app and it didn't work for you, just don't start there on the web. That would be my advice. Now, as a growth operator, I'm looking to pre-validate and invalidate experiments at the hypothesis stage, if possible, if not, as early as possible. That doesn't mean I'm looking to pick holes in experiments just because I don't like them or I have a personal preference to test something else. It means I'm looking to pick holes in any experiment before we invest significant resources into building and launching it to make sure we've fully thought through things and have the highest chance of maximizing our win rate. It's basically a pre-mortem. Why might this experiment fail? And one of the easiest ways to do this is to look at historical data for similar experiments you've conducted for that product, or historical data for the same experiment you may have run for another product. And in our case, we have data right in front of us that says, hey, be careful about investing in this, it probably won't work. Now, I think a lot of people know this, right? It's by no means groundbreaking advice, but I think what might be more insightful is that this tends to just go out of the window when it comes to trending growth strategies or growth hacks. By that, I mean teams use best-in-class apps as reference points to suggest they should follow a trend. One, without thinking through why that might have worked for that best-in-class app, and two, when they wouldn't use that app as a reference point for other less trendy things. When I say thinking through why that might have worked for the best-in-class app, well, we just covered an example of that. Blinkist has a long in-app onboarding journey, therefore they saw success with a long web onboarding journey. And when I say they wouldn't use that app as a reference point for other less trendy things, what I basically mean is they understand the difference between their app and the best-in-class app, whether that be subscription plans, category, audience, market, whatever it is, product, and they recognize that the nuance is a real thing. But when it comes to trends and hot topics, we get FOMO and it blinds us to that nuance. And then we end up copying apps that we just have no business copying. So instead, what you should do is ask yourself, is my biggest competitor doing this? Or is there an app in my category that I would typically compare myself when it comes to mobile subscription benchmarks or app growth strategies, or an app that I've stolen strategies from before successfully? Are they doing this? And are they seeing success with it? And that second part, are they seeing success with it, is the most important thing. Hard to tell, maybe easier with time, right? Like, I don't know if they're succeeding. They started it 2 weeks ago, they're still doing it. Maybe. I guess if your Mercedes and BMW is doing something, maybe you want to copy them quickly if you think it's super successful and you're like, we should be doing that. But if you have doubts, maybe you wait it out, let them waste their resources, and then jump on the bandwagon when you know it works, or you let them waste their resources and learn from their failure. Now, of course, I'm not just saying that you should not be innovative and just copy anyone else. But what I'm saying is if you're going to be looking at other apps as references and to follow, at least look at ones that you would typically compare yourself to and that are going to be most relevant to compare yourself to. Otherwise, you'll just stray really far in the wrong direction. So what apps don't see success with long onboarding journeys and web onboarding quizzes? This is probably a test you've done, right? Majority of you watching this, you've already tested long versus short onboarding journeys. But in my experience, a lot of utility apps and entertainment apps, but mainly utility apps, just do not see success with long onboarding journeys. Historically, I've always liked to say apps that serve very functional, matter-of-fact use cases, which is just a long-winded way of saying utility apps. Weather apps are a great example of that. You could ask the user where they are and get them to type in their location. Where's home? Home's here. Where's work? Work's here. Where are you now? I'm here. And then take them through a long onboarding journey, or you could just ask them for location permissions, right? So these utility apps typically have a very short time to value. They can deliver their value to users really quickly, and it becomes super obvious what the user's going to use the product for in their life. And they often serve one specific job to be done. And you can both try that out and do it in a short period of time. In fact, if you head to the App Store now, or just search on the web for top iOS utility apps, you can scroll through the different apps, download them, give them a go, and pay attention to their onboarding journeys. For a couple of them, search on the web, see if they have a web funnel, and see if it's a onboarding quiz or survey. Chances are it won't be. So utility apps in most cases should avoid web-to-app onboarding funnels. But what about beyond these? Are there any general rules that apply that we can either take from utility apps versus health and fitness apps, or that I've observed that developers and teams that have non-utility apps should be aware of to figure out whether or not web-to-app onboarding quizzes make sense for them? Or on the flip side, maybe you have a utility app which actually would work with a web-to-app funnel, and you just heard me say the last thing and thought, well, let's not do it. Indeed, there are. There are a couple of rules that I want to share. Ask yourself this question. Will personalizing the early product journey improve the user experience? Right? Will personalizing the early product journey improve the user experience? If we take Calm as an example, one of the reasons they have a long onboarding journey is because they are, well, side note, I find in the mobile app space, to be honest, in all of tech and especially in the startup world, that people look for hacks. They look for quick tactics, silver bullets, and quick wins and tricks that they can just implement. And it's all about trying these little tricks to improve conversion and get the users to do what we want. Yes, these things work, right? I'll always say they work, and I will continue to share them because they work. But there's a reason why they work. And one of the biggest reasons this channel exists is to flesh out the reasons behind these successful growth strategies and dig into why they may work for some apps, why they might not work for other apps, and really investigate those tactics, experiments, and strategies. I say this because as far as personalization goes, there is this thing, I mean, it's not even new, right? It's been around for years where we kind of fake personalization, especially in onboarding. We ask the users a series of questions, and then we give the illusion that something at the end of this is going to be tailored to you, and it's going to be different from the standard product, when in actual case, it's the exact same product. Now, I'm not saying anything against this. It works. I've done it. I suggest it. It's great. But taking a more high-level approach about why this would be useful beyond just tricking users or getting an incremental increase over the short term, it works as a way to validate the idea that personalization in the early product experience will improve the user experience. Rather than actually spending time building algorithms and ML models to actually personalize the user experience when you may not have the resource, dev time, or data to even do that, we can sell the idea of personalization and see who bites. And then over time, if it does, we can invest resources in building out. But if we look at Calm as an example, they really do personalize things. If I come to the product because I can't sleep and I answer the onboarding questions in such a way, I get a very different product experience than if I come to the app to focus for deep work and I answer the questions in that way. Oftentimes with education apps, health and fitness apps, dating apps, apps that have a lot of content, the user is here for something specific and you offer lots of things. Or maybe the user has specific preferences and you don't know what those preferences are. You as the developer, the product manager, right, the product owner, are trying to make your product as relevant as possible for the user base. And you want to do this as early as possible so that they can activate or even start a trial. In short, you need the user data to be able to customize the experience, and therefore you need to get that data, and the only way to do that is to ask the user some questions, right? Hence the onboarding survey and onboarding funnel. If you know this is the case for your app, then chances are a web onboarding journey will work for you, regardless of what I said before about utility apps in different categories, right? If this is super important, you need a lot of data from users to personalize the experience, and you know it's going to lead to higher activation rates and higher initial conversion rates, yeah, you should get that data, and a great way to do it is a web onboarding journey. It ties to the utility app point because typically utility apps serve one use case, one job to be done, and don't need early experience personalization, but it's not always the case. The second rule, the other variable I'm talking about here, is the degree and type of friction that holds users back. The question to ask is, are there a huge variety or a number of complex objections that hold users back from buying your product? Not just price, right? Price is obviously something that may hold some users back. And if you're a high ticket product, price is going to be particularly important. But beyond price, are there any other internal, external, or social objections that are preventing users from starting a trial, paying for your product, right, and investing their resource and time into your app. Examples of this might be users just aren't emotionally ready to use the product, or users don't think they can commit the time or the effort to actually achieve the goal that your product is promising or that they've set out to do. Right? If you imagine a fitness app and people need to wait 8 months before they start to see results, that's going to be a blocker. Or what if users can commit the time to the product, but they don't think it will work for them because they're different, because they're a completely different person, which everyone thinks, right? This is one that comes up a lot. People just think, yeah, your app works for other people, but it won't work for me because something. Or I need to adopt tool X and tool Y alongside your app in order to actually use this. I don't have them yet, so it's a blocker. These are just examples, right? There's tons of others. And hopefully this is making sense. But essentially there are different types of friction and objections that we have to deal with that prevent users from making progress. If these exist and you are aware of these, and they come up a lot, long onboarding journeys give you an opportunity to address and handle them. This is a really important concept, and I'm definitely going to make a video or multiple videos on friction, different types of friction, how to deal with friction, bad friction versus good friction, because all those things are relevant. But for now, I think it's worth just saying a long onboarding journey is like a long sales funnel. You can identify these objections through the journey and handle them at different times. If this is you, there is a very solid chance that web-to-app onboarding quizzes would work well for you. If this isn't you, then you probably don't need one, or can get away with a substantially shorter journey. Because there's also the danger of assuming that onboarding journeys have to be a certain length, or they have to be super long, they have to be like Headway, and they have to be like Noom, when that just isn't the case. They can be 3 to 5 questions, right? And that's fine. And maybe that's how you start on web. But if that isn't the case, right, and you're like, yep, I don't need data to personalize the early user experience, there aren't that many objections that typically come up, other than price and a couple of obvious ones, then chances are you shouldn't really force the web onboarding quiz, in my opinion. So what should you do instead? Am I saying that you are forever bound to direct-to-app funnels, that your destiny is to be beholden by the fees that the stores charge? Your cash flow is forever a slave to Apple? Yes. Thank you for watching this video. I'm joking. No. Remember, I'm not saying that these apps can't sell on the web, or that these apps shouldn't run web-to-app funnels. I'm saying that these apps shouldn't run web-to-app quiz funnels. But you can absolutely run web-to-app funnels. It's just the quiz funnels probably won't convert that well for you, in my experience. I have seen apps running the most simple web funnels ever, landing page, checkout page, nothing, convert property. In fact, I've seen some utility apps running this exact funnel. It works, right? You don't always need masses of context to sell your product, especially if you have some really good top of funnel creative that does some of that lifting for you. A way of thinking that I have when it comes to this is the more simple your product and the more simple your customer's purchase decision process, the more simple your funnel can be. The more complex your product and the more complex your customer's purchase decision process, the more complex your funnel will need to be. This applies to both in-app and web app, survey onboarding and other onboarding funnels. It kind of applies across the board. So here's my advice to help you take that first step. Whatever your pre-purchase journey is at the moment in the app, assuming it works for you and is somewhat profitable, build that on the web as your first test. If that's store listing, hard paywall, then run that. Landing page, checkout. I think sometimes we think it can't be that easy, right? Because there are so many apps running these complex funnels, so surely the reason they're running those complex funnels is because it's the only way that works. No, it's what works for them, and often, as we've explored, those apps are centered around personalization, require a lot of user data, and have a heap of objections to overcome. So my advice is to start simple, right, and build out whatever it is that's working for you in-app on the web as closely as possible. Then once you've actually get some traffic through, you can see the data of the funnel and the performance, then you can start to figure out what to test next and iterate from that point. And then you can begin to test iterations and crazy big swing ideas of different things that may or may not work on the web that you're seeing others do, absolutely. But this is where I think most apps should start, especially if you've realized that, hey, I don't need personalization, there aren't that many objections, I don't need tons of user data, and I have a very simple product. So hopefully this video has been helpful. Please do like and subscribe so that the channel can grow. Leave any thoughts, questions you might have in the comments, and I will see you next time.